Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave. Today, I have 12 glitch in the matrix and supernatural stories for you. We start with an emotional gut punch in a dream of the future. Case file number 2342, written by Mo Annie Mo. The Fair, the Photo, and the Dream that spanned decades. I've always dreamt very vividly and had small things I've dreamt of actually happen, months or years later, but nothing as big as this. I've had this recurring dream since I was about 6 or so, up until I was in my mid-20s, now 38. But I dreamt about seeing myself as a little girl, always an adult in my dreams, on a carousel and waving to myself and being so happy. I was wearing a romper that were popular attire in the 80s for little girls, and became popular again within the past 5 years or so, and a pair of sandals. I always wondered why I would dream of this, like maybe something traumatic happened and my brain was trying to remember or some crap, but turned out to be quite the opposite. So fast forward to 2018. I was at a fair with my family and my boyfriend took our daughter, 2.5, on the carousel as I waited taking pictures being so giddy and happy. I had miscarried 1.5 years before getting pregnant with her, and it was really hard. I didn't realize it at the time, until I was going through the pics later on, that it was that dream I had on and off for years. It was my future daughter I was seeing in my dreams all along, not myself. Same outfit, same shoes, same overwhelmingly happy feeling for just a regular day. At the fair, everything was just the same. I cried just thinking about it. I know some people won't believe me, but I don't care. It's a magical thing that I experienced. And I pull up the photo of her from that day from time to time, and just am in complete shock over it to this day. This is a beautiful story, and I had to include it, because it's so heartwarming. Isn't it? Yeah, seeing into the future is pretty crazy. But that's an event that doesn't really matter unless it connects us to some deeper meaning, and this is definitely as deep as it gets. Case file number 2343, written by Spirited Inspired. No turn, no time. I am house sitting, and I've been for the past week. I drove to work this morning, but I know this route very well, despite being back roads. I have no need for Google Maps to get there. It was 5:43 in the morning when I left, and I own a pet sitting business, so I don't need to shower and get ready for early morning visits. I can just throw on clothes and go. So, albeit I was still getting with the program mentally, I turned onto the first side street off the main road from my route. This side street is about 1 mile long. It's dark out, so I double-checked the street sign. It's the correct road. I traveled down it for a while, and there is snow on the ground, so granted things look different. But I start thinking, there should be houses by now, and I've definitely driven further than 1 mile. I see a car approaching behind me in my rear view, so I pull over to turn on Google Maps. It tells me 0.2 miles up the road, I turn left on a road that I'm familiar with, as it is part of my route of back roads, but not the road I am expecting to be next. Also, it's definitely not the correct direction I should be turning next. Thinking it's early morning and I've just been confused, I get back on the road. When I get to the end of the road and have to turn left or right, I realize somehow I didn't ever come to the end of that first side road and just turn right. I somehow skipped ahead to the next road and have to turn left. I know exactly where I am at this point, obvious landmark and street sign, and all the roads and landmarks after that are as normal. That first side street I took off the main road is just woods until the last quarter mile, when there are very recognizable houses, and then I turn right. That never happened. I kept going on, and when I felt lost and confused, I checked maps. I was on the road I would have had to turn right on after that first side street, and quite a ways down it. So, logically, I know it was early morning, and I do sometimes zone out when I drive, but if I zone out, I tend to miss turns. I was looking for my turn the whole time. I paid attention to the clock when I got to the next client's house. It was 2 or 3 minutes past arrival time. I had pulled over and checked the map, so that tracks. No missing time there. I don't know, so strange. Nothing like this has ever happened before. I hope I explained it well enough. It's nothing exciting, but bizarre, because I know I never turned off that first side street. I may not have been fully alert, but I was looking for the landmarks before my turn, and they never appeared. Classic space-time portals, baby. They never get old. Case file number 2344, written by Minnie Apple. Gas and Grace. When I was 6, my mom was driving my 3 siblings and me somewhere home during rush hour traffic. She ran out of gas on a major highway. We panicked for a while. My siblings were freaking out. This was 20 years ago. After about 10 minutes or so, my mom's brick phone had died. We were basically stranded in rush hour with 4 kids on a major highway. Eventually, someone stops. I remember it so clearly. He was this tall black man with a white beard and white hair, wearing a white suit, driving a big cream-looking Lincoln-type car. He had this incredibly calm demeanor. He pulls a gas tank out of his back seat that has virtually nothing else in it, besides the gas can, and said he'd be back in 10 minutes. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, by some miracle, this guy drives through the grassy median, crossed 4 lanes of rush hour traffic going 70 miles an hour with the gas. My mom asked for his phone number to repay him and send a thank you note. And he gave us his business card. He was a pastor at a church. A couple of days later, my mom looked into it, called the number which was disconnected. She called around in the area it was supposed to be located in, and residents said they'd never heard of it. The church basically didn't exist. Case file number 2345, written by 5-Star Front Desk. Keep the change, honey. One of my jobs when I was young, 18, was at a Coney Island-style restaurant in my city. The restaurant was open 24/6. We closed at 3 a.m. Sunday morning, reopened at 6 a.m. Monday, but stayed open all the time for the rest of the week. This particular thing happened about 2:30 a.m. on a Friday. I was the only waitress on shift, and the owner was in the kitchen cooking. We were the only 2 people there. At the time, we had a regular I'll call Jerry. Jerry was a barfly and a senior citizen. He would come in every night after the bar closed. He would have coffee, 2 eggs over easy, and wheat toast. He ordered the same thing every time, and every time his total came to $4.37. He'd give me $6 and tell me to keep the change. So as I'm rolling silverware and waiting for our old pal Jerry, I see a few emergency vehicles go down the main street towards the bar. Lights and sirens on. About a minute later, Jerry comes in. I get him coffee and ask him if he knows what's going on. He just shook his head, no. So I told my boss Jerry was there, and my boss waved at him through the kitchen window, and within 3 minutes, Jerry's order was up. He's sitting at the counter, and after a little while, he slaps down some money and says, "Keep the change, honey," like he usually did, and walks out. I went over to cash out the check, and the food hadn't been touched. Neither had the coffee, and there was a $100 bill on the counter. I was a teen mom and perpetually broke, so that much money was basically life-changing. I saw in the paper on Sunday that Jerry had been involved in a fight at the bar that night and had been fatally injured. Rest in peace, Jerry. But then the question is, how did presumably his ghost, his spirit, carry around physical money? That was on him. He didn't just materialize it, so his spiritual form was able to hold on to real money. Fascinating. Case file number 2346, written by Maya Sturbate. The Case of the Phantom Franklin. Back in 2014, my boyfriend and I had plans to go out to a bar for karaoke night. I can't remember which one of us had the $100 bill originally, and which one of us was the person who was supposed to be hanging on to it. So we get ready and we're about to head out, making sure we had everything we need. That's when we realized that neither one of us had the money. There were only 3 of us in the house, my boyfriend, myself, and his father. who was in the living room at the time watching TV. He was old and very slow getting around, because he was still recovering from back surgery. So there's no way he could have had anything to do with it. My boyfriend and I searched everywhere in our room. We checked the closet, boxes, bags, shoes that were on the floor of the closet, thinking maybe it had fallen when we were changing or something. We checked under the bed. Maybe it fell on the floor and the fan or AC blew it under there. We checked the hamper, all of our drawers, my purse like 4 times, the bathroom, the trash can. We didn't really bother checking the rest of the house because we hadn't gone anywhere else except for our bedroom and bathroom. We were extremely frustrated and had literally torn apart the room looking for this damn $100 bill. Eventually, we just gave up on going out that night, and due to my frustration, I'm just ready to go to bed. After getting in bed, I noticed something strange touching my leg. I lift up the sheet and bedspread, and there's the $100 bill. Under the bedspread, under the sheet, in the literal middle of the bed, that had been made since that morning. The $100 wasn't even around until that evening. And when I say that I had made the bed, I didn't mean I just pulled the covers up. I'm talking like I made the bed hotel style. Tuck sheet, sheet folded back, bedspread folded back with the bed pillows overlapping the fold, and then folded back up over the pillows. I finished with 2 pillow shams, a couple throw pillows, and a bolster. How did it get there? There are 2 very good reasons why I'm 100% positive that it wasn't my boyfriend toying with me. He was just as angry as I was, if not more. He's the one that's a singer and musician. He really wanted to go out. He wouldn't have been able to make the bed back the way I had made it. He's so not that detail-oriented. If he would have placed it there, it would have been noticeable. Messed up a blanket or disheveled pillows. Or if he went in from the side, there's no way he would have remembered to tuck the sheet back in. In fact, he doesn't even like that I tucked the sheets in, so he certainly wouldn't have done it either. Yeah, I mean, honestly, they're too tight at hotels. If you're tucking them in that much, well, you just feel like you're in a coffin. It's crazy. Case file number 2347, written by ASM 42186. The Yield Sign Sentinel. This happened when I was in high school in southern Michigan, probably 2003-2004. I had spent the evening with my girlfriend at her house and was driving home late, between 11 p.m. and midnight. My car was low on gas, and the gas station in the nearby village was already closed. So I decided to go a little out of the way to a 24-hour truck stop and gas station along the highway to fill up the tank. Usually, I would follow the direct route back to my family's house out in the countryside, from the village, but it's easier to take an alternate route back from this truck stop, so that's what I decided to do. This was a pitch black night, probably a new moon or heavily overcast. I was driving down this country road and approaching a T intersection, indicated by a large yellow yield sign on the right side of the road. People see these road signs every day, so everyone has a pretty good idea of how big they are. About a yard wide and 7 to 8 feet off the ground. As I got closer to the sign, I saw a large, low, dark shape dash across the road, from left to right, just out of the range of my headlights. Naturally, I slowed down, being used to seeing deer on the road, but it quickly became clear that this thing was no animal I'd ever seen before. Once it had reached the right side of the road, it reared up and stood on its hind legs, right in front of the yield sign, almost completely obscuring the sign itself. It was covered in jet black hair, so dark that I couldn't make out any details, except the broad shoulders and reflective pale eyes. Safe to say, I noped right the hell out of there as fast as I could. Whatever it was, I hope I never see it again. It gives me chills to this day when I recall the event, and I really try not to think about it when I have to leave my car to open the gate, or when I sometimes have to help tend to the horses late in the evening. Case file number 2348, written by Somniosfera, the mysterious kitten who claimed my home and my heart. Hello all, I am a philosophy teacher. I live in Mexico City. I am half Mexican, half Italian. This will be relevant to the story I'm going to tell you. I don't drink alcohol or use drugs, no history of mental illness. Back in 2017, I lived in the same house I live now. I lived alone and happy with my books and my 2 cats, a tuxie cat named Gordita and Ronnie, a big Siamese kitty. One particular and sunny April morning, I was at work, but I left early because there was a workers' strike at the university where I teach. Some colleagues offered me to go for a coffee to discuss the conflict that was happening that day, but I refused. The reason why I refused was that I felt a very strange and urgent need to go back home. I feel this intuition, this force that was leading me or pushing me to go back home. Now I return home, feeling uneasy, since I only had 2 or 3 times this feeling in my life, this intuition, this strong gut feeling. I felt almost scared of how powerful and unexplainable was that urgent feeling of coming back home. I was in this state of slight distress when I pulled the key of my apartment and when I opened that door. I saw in the hallway a very tiny calico stray kitten, a very small kitten. She had a swollen ear and looked malnourished. At that moment, I approached her and immediately I told her, "Hey sweetie, who are you? Are you hurt?" Then in the blink of an eye, she ran into me, and since the door of the apartment was already opened, she literally stormed into my apartment. She ran into the living room. Here's the part that left me totally confused and in shock. I followed her into the living room. She stopped for a moment, locked eyes with me, and in my mind I literally heard a voice, a message. I can't fully describe what it was, but it wasn't something that was both broken Spanish and broken Italian, my 2 native languages, that could be translated as, "This is my house, you my mom." I felt that I was going crazy. I felt that my stomach sank. Then seconds after this happened, the kitty so casually went into the window of the living room. She sat there, ready to take a nap under the sun. Like she already knew that this was going to be her favorite place. My 2 other cats came to see what was happening, and they looked at her with this huge what-the-hell cat look. Gordita looked at her curiously, and Ronnie was also totally confused. Now, I was still in shock about the words, or voice, that I listened in my head. I had to sit down for a moment since I recognized my own inner voice, the voice of my inner monologue, and this was different, as crazy as that sounds. Yes, it was the kitty talking telepathically to me. Well, when I calmed myself down, 2 hours later, I went to buy kitten food and a new cat bed. I ran into one neighbor and told her what happened. My neighbor told me that she saw the kitten since the early morning and was smelling and trying to get into my door. That was 8 years ago, and indeed, I became her mom. Her name is Pidokia, and I love her with all my heart, and she and I have a very strong connection. She follows me everywhere. We are so very close to each other. I haven't heard her voice again, but I feel that I can communicate with her beyond words. I feel also that she can astrally project herself into my dreams. What would have happened if I didn't come back home early that day? Did I feel her presence in advance? She indeed connected to your mind and your heart. How sweet. Case file number 2349, written by MC Mount 21. The Thing That Tapped. I was alone in a semi-expensive hotel room somewhere in the Far East. I had gone to bed, fully awake still. Then I began to hear light tapping coming from the door. Tap, tap. It was like someone tapped the door a few times with their finger. I didn't think anything of it. Hotels have all sorts of noises. I remember that it was about 30 seconds between the sequences of few taps. Slowly the tapping started to move from the door towards my bed though. The tapping started to sound like it was coming from the cabinets next to my door. Each tap came a little bit closer. At this point, I started to be a little concerned. I turned the lights on, and the tapping stopped. Waited a few minutes, decided that it was nothing, and turned the lights off. Even with the lights off though, the room was lit enough that I could see. There was nothing where the tapping had been coming from. The tapping resumed. In about 30-second intervals, tap, tap, coming closer. Suddenly, The tapping was coming from the bed, right next to my feet. I could feel the tapping this time. It felt and sounded exactly like water was dripping from the roof, dropping on my bed. Tap, tap, tap. This time there were no intervals. It was just ceaseless rhythmic tapping. I was freaking out now. I couldn't figure out anything that caused this. I turned the lights on. I could reach a switch lying in the bed. And something ran away from next to my bed back to the door. There was nothing to be seen, but the footsteps sounded like a child's, who was unnaturally fast. The interval between the steps was very short. I'd say about a little longer than a rat's. But the weight of the steps was that of a small child. I could hear where it was as it was running, but my eyes saw nothing there. I figured that I won't bother to leave the room, as creepy as it was. I wrote a note on the small notepad that hotel rooms often have, just in case this thing was worse than I gave it credit for. I don't know if hotel room ghosts have a murderous tendency or not. I kept the lights on for about half an hour, and then decided to try to sleep. I turned them off. About 5 minutes later, the tapping resumed on my bed. I turned the lights on, it stopped. Lights off, a few minutes, it resumed, the same spot. It was like clockwork. I repeated this about 5 times or so. I slept the rest of the night, lights on. To this day, I have no idea what it could have been. Can't say I believe in ghosts, but that experience, at the least, has opened me up to the possibility. My God, is that creepy. And it's so replicatable. I wonder if you went back to the same room and tried again. Would it keep happening? That's the most replicatable ghost that I've ever heard about. Case file number 2350, written by Rusty Jake. A wardrobe with a vendetta. One of my first jobs was as an apprentice gas engineer at a small company in the northwest UK. One time we got a contract at an old military airfield near Macclesfield in the UK. This place was called Woodford Airfield. Woodford Airfield was an active mod test site for the RAF's Nimrod back in the Cold War. One of the guys I worked with used to work at the site doing maintenance. It's now a housing estate with a heritage museum, but back in 2014, where I had this experience, there was a decommissioned operation on lots of the buildings where they were demolished. As we arrived at the site, we were greeted by the security at the gate. This consists of 2 blokes and a Land Rover. They informed us that on that day, we were the only contractors on the site. A record of people at the site has to be kept, and strictly followed. We signed in and proceeded with our jobs. Near the main entrance was a cluster of aircraft hangars, some admin buildings, and lots of small roads strewn with rubble and markings of dangerous areas. The general feel and appearance of the area was Chernobyl-esque, with lots of murky, gloomy, abandoned buildings. One of these buildings was an old lodge. This was on the far side of the airfield, away from the main gate. This lodge housed workers and pilots. It had not been used in many years. The front entrance was overgrown. The carpets in the reception were musty and molding from years of exposure. Our task was to drain all the water from the building's heating system. This involved going to each room in the lodge and spending some time there, messing about with radiators to drain the air and water out. We split up and got to it. I remember everything looked exactly as it was the last time people had stayed. Beds unmade, old TVs in the room. One room was full of dead wasps. The corridors had a creepy and gloomy feel to them. No electricity, so no lights worked in the building. I eventually made my way upstairs to meet my colleague. He was waiting by the entrance to the attic space, which was a small hatch, about waist height against the wall in the center of the room. I had been standing in the doorway of this room, with my back to the adjacent room. We had to come through to get to the attic entry. Immediately behind me, and to my left, was a large wooden wardrobe. With no warning, the door of this wardrobe opens with enough force to knock me forwards. Dismayed, I asked my colleague if it was him who hit me on my back. He replied confused, obviously not, as he was crouched a few feet into the room that I was facing at the time. I look around and notice now the open wardrobe door. There is no one behind me. Concerned it might be someone squatting in the building, we search around and find no one present. No sounds, nothing, just an ominous feeling throughout the place. We radioed security, and they confirmed no one had come to the site. And they were both at their posts by the main gate, some 2 miles away. This is genuinely one of those things that I cannot explain or rationalize. Case file number 2351, written by Mummy24. The Uncanny Mother. This story is from a childhood friend who told me this, and it still unnerves me to this day, even if it didn't happen to me. She was genuinely freaked out, and her family even backed up her claim, so here goes. Basically, my friend and her family moved into this rental property, which my friend said was haunted. It gave everyone an off feeling. Those who visited or stayed over would mention it. I myself experienced this odd feeling of foreboding whenever I went over there, and believed in the consensus that the house was haunted. It honestly felt oppressive in the house, and you would feel this pitiful dread. It is hard to compute into words and was extremely uncomfortable to experience. Anyway, this particular inexplicable event, that is the basis of this post, was enough for my friend's family to pack up and stay with relatives until they moved out. On this fateful afternoon, my friend had arrived back home from the park and heard an argument taking place in the kitchen between her mom and dad. My friend thought this was odd, as both her parents should be at work. So she called out, "Mom?" before unlocking the front door and going inside. My friend said the house fell instantly silent, an uncanny silence. Like all the air had been sucked out of the place and felt stifling and wrong. Then her mom said, "Hey, friend's name, we're just in here." My friend was just outside the closed kitchen door at this point and froze. It was her mother's voice, but there was something off, like the cadence was missing. It sounded flat and unnatural. My friend decided to bolt back out the front door and wait outside. But she said as she turned back to the house, she saw her mother peering at her from the lounge room window. But it wasn't her mother. The face was the same, everything was the same, but her face was devoid of anything. There was no recognition on her mother's face. There was no indication that she was looking directly at her daughter. There was no emotion in the expression. The eyes looked unstaring and utterly blank. My friend screamed and ran down the street to her mother's work and confirmed that she was there all this time and had never been home. Initially, my friend's mother reasoned that someone must have broke in, but a later investigation proved nothing had been stolen and the back door was locked, as was the front door when my friend came home. No one could rationalize who my friend saw in the window and why it looked so much like her mother, but not fully human. So that was the deciding factor to nope out. The landlord of the house denied anything like this happening when they lived there, but did admit tenants didn't stay long, saying there was something wrong in the house. My friend also told me that she was the only one who actually saw anything definitively sinister, but her family said they definitely felt an evil presence there, which ultimately manifested into the doppelganger experience my friend had. Utterly terrifying. I can concur with that last sentence, my God. Anything that can impersonate someone, but isn't really them, a mimic, a doppelganger, this seems to stretch beyond alternate universe shenanigans where a copy of a different mom is in your universe. Clearly, she wasn't all there. It was almost like a base template that loaded in, but without the soul. Case file number 2352, written by Refused Barf. The Watcher in White. I live in the apartment at my mom's house, and lately I've been seeing the same person with white pajamas like clothes on. Never seen their face, and not sure about the gender. The first time was when I walked past the hallway and saw them standing in the master bedroom doorway out the corner of my eye. When I looked, there was nothing, but there was a white jacket hanging on a closet door, so I just assumed my mind was playing tricks on me. The second time was when I was outside by the pool and saw them standing in the master bedroom through the sliding glass door. Then they walked towards the bed where my 2-year-old sister was sleeping. and when I went to check, there was nothing. The third time was when we had a power outage and I was home alone. I decided to take a nap in some shade outside by the pool. I got this eerie feeling someone was looking at me in my dream and woke up. When I opened my eyes, there they were standing right next to me, and shortly after, vanished again. The last time was yesterday. I was putting up fencing on our gates so my puppy can walk and play freely outside in the backyard. One of the gates are in this long, narrow passage that goes from the backyard to the front yard, next to the master bedroom. As I was working, I again got this eerie feeling someone was looking at me. I turned around and there they stood at the end of the passage, and shortly after vanished again. Almost every time I took it as my mind was playing tricks on me. The first time I thought I mistook the jacket for a person. The second I thought it might have been a reflection on the glass. Third, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me because of the dream. But the fourth time, I don't know why, but that one really freaked me out. So I told my mom about what I saw. She then told me that she saw a person in white clothing several mornings in the driveway when she drove to work, but stopped seeing them at around the same time I saw it the first time. Usually I don't believe in this kind of thing, but I can't explain how my mom stopped seeing them in the driveway, and then I started seeing them near the master bedroom. Psyche slowly infiltrating this entity. Case file number 2353, written by Older Sister 5. A tune hauntingly familiar. This happened about 12 years ago when I was around 17, and my little sister was 7 or 8. She doesn't remember much of it, but I do, mainly because I think about it so often. It's one of those experiences that I can't explain, and for someone as skeptical as me, that's very unsettling. It was summer vacation, and I was babysitting my little sister while both my parents were at work. I have another sister, 2 years younger than me, but she wasn't at home on that particular day. We lived on the second floor of an old Chicago townhouse with a front entrance and a back porch. That day, my little sister and I were both in the living room, me watching TV and her playing some computer game. She was losing and let out a curse word, which at the time, she was starting to do more often. She was usually a very well-behaved kid, but my parents were trying to break the habit. So, following their rule, I sent her to sit in the kitchen for 5 minutes. I kept watching TV, completely losing track of time. It wasn't until my show ended that I realized over 40 minutes had gone by. I felt awful as I rushed to the kitchen, ready to apologize for leaving her in there for so long. But just as I got close, I heard something I really didn't expect. I heard whistling. It was strange for 2 reasons. First, I'd never heard my little sister whistle before. And second, this wasn't just random whistling, it was a tune. A deliberate, steady melody. At first, I felt even worse, thinking I had left her there for so long that she had taught herself how to whistle. But as I stood there, listening, something started to feel off. The sound didn't seem like it was coming from my sister at all. It sounded older, deeper, familiar in a way. It sounded exactly like my dad. My dad did usually come in through the back door when he got home from work. So for a split second, I thought maybe he had gone home early. But that didn't make sense. He wasn't due back for at least another 3 or 4 hours. Still, the resemblance was uncanny. The pitch, the rhythm, the way the notes lingered for just a second too long, it was his whistle. I started walking slower and started to get annoyed because I knew once my sister told him, I'd be in trouble. I slowly poked my head in, expecting to see both of them, but instead I found my sister alone, completely knocked out, head resting in her arms, fast asleep. But the whistling was still going on. The sound was right there, filling the room. It wasn't coming from my sister. It wasn't coming from outside. It was just there. I don't remember how long I stood there, listening, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Eventually, I ran back to the door, yanking it open, expecting to see someone standing outside. No one was there. I ran to the windows, looking down, looking around. Nothing. But the entire time, that damn whistling never stopped. It was still in the kitchen, even as I stepped out onto the porch, even as I backed away. It wasn't following me. It was staying in the room, right where I had left my sleeping sister. I panicked. I grabbed my sister, barely waking her up as I carried her out of the house, and ran straight to my friend's place down the street. I waited there until my mom got home. When I told her what had happened, she brushed it off. She barely reacted, didn't seem to care, and honestly, that made me feel even crazier. So I just stopped talking about it. I never told my dad or my other sister. But here's the part that still makes my stomach drop whenever I think about it. A few days later, when my dad did come home from work, he walked in through the back door, and he was whistling the exact same tune I had heard in the kitchen days before. The exact same one. I don't have an explanation. I've thought about every possible logical answer, but nothing fits. It wasn't an echo, it wasn't someone outside, and it definitely wasn't my sister. I've never told anyone this story since, but I still think about it all the time. So it could be some sort of space-time portal that was just sending the whistling sound, the reverberations in the atmosphere, what we call sound, into the kitchen. But that's so hyper-specific. Why would a portal do that? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Maybe it was just astral projection, but of just the sound that he was making? None of these really fit in the sense that I've never heard a situation like that before. I don't know if it's possible. Alternatively, it could be a version of your dad in a different universe where he was already at home and he was whistling. And as long as a copy is close enough, they could like the same tune. But honestly, nothing too creepy. Nothing to worry about, in my estimation. Now time for the jokes of the day. My girlfriend left me a note on the fridge this morning that said, "This isn't working." So I called her and told her the fridge was working perfectly. I got pulled over today, and the cop asked if I know why he pulled me over. I replied, "Is it because you want to see how tall I am?" He said, "Step out of the car, sir." See? I knew it. I can tolerate algebra, maybe even calculus, but geometry is where I draw the line. Honestly, yes, outside of the joke, I don't like geometry. I can handle numbers, but shapes and angles? Ugh. Singing in the shower is great, until you get shampoo in your mouth. Then it's just a soap opera. Have you heard that the Hulk started recycling recently? He's going green. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.